obviously not true. This is new grounds for a lot of people. The good news is that our county seems to be the lowest in the state as far as cases, and that is great. That's what we want. That's what we want to keep on doing. And just a reminder that we wear a mask. Maybe we don't even think they work, and that's okay. We don't have to do it. We wear it for for the love of the other people, for those around us, and while keeping in mind all of these things. Like, look, we understand that there's a virus, and we don't want to make the same mistake. All right, think about the Spanish flu and how many people that killed and swept through. Maybe this isn't that, but to ignore history is not smart. But also to realize that it was talked about this morning that the government can, or I shouldn't say the government. I say people like to take advantage of situations like this, and to be cognizant of that as well. Okay, just be cognizant of that, and just realize that we're going to do what is best for each other, and we live in a free country, right? A free place. We'll see. That's actually how I want to start. A week ago, I'm sorry, we celebrated. 1 second, I won't breathe, I promise.
I think you.
Okay. Okay. Facial recognition, what technology has come to today. Okay. But we celebrated a week ago. We celebrated the birth of our country, our Independence Day, we really celebrate our freedoms, right? Something that we actually cherish. Let me ask you, Lauren, no answering. What does freedom mean to America? What does it mean?
Freedom to worship.
Okay, that's maybe more as a religious thing. Okay, what does it mean as a citizen of a country, I guess?
Freedom to speak out.
To speak, okay, yeah.
To not have to have soldiers coming and living in your home, like it was in America when it began.
Okay. Yeah.
Freedom to live by my own conscience, to do the things that I feel as pertinent in any given circumstance without the harming of others, and not being told that I have to do this or that because somebody else's opinion.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you. So, kind of opening a can of worms, but it's good. It's good to talk about these things and to be open about it, because it's the elephant in the room, and there are drastic differences on either side of this, okay? So it's okay. We can still love each other through that, even if we have different opinions as well. So I think part of sometimes our mentality is, now we may not say this verbally, but our mentality is freedom is being able to do whatever I want, whenever I want to do it. The problem with that view of freedom is that often whenever we do something that we want to do, I love what you said, Paul, it's not thinking about the other person. It's not considering ultimate freedom on a deeper level. And another problem with that is that a lot of times we desire bad things. The Bible talks about this. The heart is deceitful above all else. It desires, sometimes bad things. And I love Gordon MacDonald in his book, Ordering Your Private World. He talks about when we become enslaved. Now, we're going to talk about this today. When we become enslaved to something, or we feel like we need it, okay, we keep coming back to whatever it is that we need, because we like it, or whatever it is that draws us back to that. When we do that, we don't just become enslaved to the thing, okay? When we keep coming back to it. Think of any drugs or anything like that. We're enslaved to that. Not only are we enslaved to that thing, but we are enslaved to the maker of the thing, to whoever's producing this thing that we're after. Okay, drugs are an extreme example, but we have many things, and I think that I saw many of you shaking your heads, no, we don't live in a free country, and I would agree, because think about this for a second. Any of you have, This is Amazon Prime. A credit card. Have you had one of these? Yeah, well, we've got a few of them, and that's a problem, isn't it? Okay, we have a few of these, and the name itself is credit card. Think about that for a second. Is there any credit on that? There's not. The name itself is a lie, actually. What it should be called is a debt card, right? You're going into debt, and you're actually enslaving yourself. And think about this. So the average, I forgot what it was, but the average household is like $5,000 in credit card debt or something like that in America, okay? So just in this one little area, we see, obviously it goes beyond this, but just in this one little area, we see that sometimes we're enslaved without really realizing it. And we go to dead-end jobs because we owe these creditors. We owe our captors because we bought things that we want and that we think we need. So you see there that there are many ways that we are enslaved, and probably we don't realize it. I love Jim Caviezel. He's the man that played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ, and he also is working on a current movie called The Sound of Freedom about child sex trafficking and what it's like to have a child be free of that. And it looks really powerful, and it's coming out. And anyway, he says this, and I love this. He says, freedom is not the ability to do whatever we want. It is the right to do what we ought. Now, that doesn't mean someone else dictates that, but it's the right to do the right thing, right? Now, this week is a little bit of a review. We've reached the end of the Sermon on the Mount, which we started in this church in January, and we are finally, I promise you, I know I've said this maybe, but I promise you this is the last week of this here, because it's not really, we're done with the words of Jesus, but we're not done with Matthew chapter 7. I'm having a hard time opening my water bottle here. All right. So, Jesus, actually throughout the Sermon on the Mount, is actually giving a reinterpretation of the Torah. Right? He goes consistently back to the Old Testament, specifically some of the Ten Commandments, and says, no, look, we have been wrong about this, and I'm going to tell you a new way of doing it. Which he uses words maybe that weren't even in there. There are many people today that see the Sermon on the Mount. Now, I want us to go back and read through this. This is Jesus' sermon to a large amount of people, and if there was ever a sermon to understand and to even memorize, it's this one. It's very difficult, and some of the things to internalize and to play out in our lives. But many people that don't even believe Jesus existed, they don't even care about who he was, really. They quote him consistently, actually. Some of the things we hear, we read the Beatitudes and see how beautiful they really are, and we nod our heads in agreement. But to live them out is much difficult. And we hear this thing called love your enemies, right? And no one can serve two masters. Or don't be anxious about tomorrow, because tomorrow is worrying enough of itself. And we use those things, and we use them in different contexts. We don't actually understand what Jesus is saying sometimes. Or a wolf in sheep's clothing. We like to call our enemies that, right? But we understand a little bit about what it is. His words ring true in other religions as well, and because people realize something about them. His words had power. His words had some sort of authority. They made sense, and they were something that changed people's lives. So we have two verses this week. Matthew chapter 7, verses 28 and 29. And it says this. It says, and when Jesus, when he finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching. For he was teaching them as one who had authority, and not as their scribes. Now that word astonished, it means like dumbfounded, stunned, amazed. And it's almost like someone ever said anything, and it's almost like something hit you in the head, and you just actually don't know how to respond. This is kind of the symbolism of the word in Greek of what it actually means to be astonished. So what made his teaching so different? These words are about what the difference was between his teaching and the teaching of their time, or the scribes' teaching. They're out of the same book, and we hear two different interpretations, but it says that his interpretation or his teaching had authority, and that word actually means power. A.M. Hunter quotes, or says this. He says, the people were astonished, and he says, after 1900 years, so are we. 2,000 years. This stuff has rang true in people's lives, and it still rings true, and even more true as time goes on. There's a reason why it hasn't gone away. Another thing is that when Jesus speaks, something that we notice, when Jesus speaks, what do the prophets say? When God has told them something, or when they speak, what do they say? Anyone? Lauren?
Thus saith the Lord.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. Yeah, she was there last week as well. They say, thus saith the Lord. In other words, here is what the Lord is saying and what he has directly told me. You know what Jesus says? He says, truly, I tell you. Truly, truly, I say to you. He consistently does that. And in this instance, we see him directly contradicting the traditional teaching of his time. He says, you have heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist one who is evil. A.B. Bruce talks about this, and he says that other teachers spoke by authority, but Jesus spoke with authority. The rabbis and Pharisees of Jesus' day were taught to teach from others' teachings upon teachings of what it meant for their day. They didn't actually search for themselves, and they just kind of regurgitated what tradition had told them. And if we look at one of the prime examples of this, Jesus' authority over the teachers of their teachings, we find this in John chapter 8. And some of the most extreme words and harshest words that Jesus has ever said are in this chapter. In John chapter 8, starting in verse 31, he says this. It says, so Jesus said to the Jews who had believed him, if you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are offspring of Abraham and have never been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you will become free? And Jesus answered them, so in other words, you see there, they have no idea that they're even slaves. They don't even recognize it, and they don't want to recognize it. Do you see that? And then Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. I know that you are the offspring. That word means seed or direct descendant, okay? You're like the family of Abraham. Yet you seek to kill me because my words find no place in you. And then he says this. He says, if you were Abraham's actual children, you would do the works that Abraham did. In other words, you wouldn't be a slave to sin, and you would do righteous works. But you do the works of your father, the devil, who is a murderer and a liar from the beginning. How is Jesus, this loving man who came here to save all men, why in the world would he ever say that to anybody? That's not true. What's that?
Because it was true.
Because it was true. I agree. But it was extremely harsh words, and you're like, Jesus, how does that even help anybody, right? How does it even help these people? And don't you care about their salvation as well? But the problem is they are people in already authority, right? And we learn about the Pharisees and understanding that they give burdens out that even they couldn't lift. But what does Jesus say about his burdens, his yoke? It's easy. In other words, he set people free from the burdens that the Pharisees had unnecessarily put on them by the law. By their interpretation, their false interpretation of the law. It has enslaved not only the people, but it has enslaved the Pharisees themselves, he's saying. This is important for us to realize, we have to realize and look back at what our teaching and our doctrine on our own level and in our own lives and as a church, has it set us free, or has it been something that has been giving a harshness or a setback, and understanding why that is. So if something is not true, obviously it's going to have bad results, right? And if something is true, it should have progressive and freeing results. That doesn't mean that necessarily we get to do whatever we want. Again, we're going back to our understanding of freedom. This word, it says he has authority. Why does his teaching have more authority than theirs? Well, he taught that, 2 weeks ago we talked about this. He says, if you listen to these words of mine and do them, you are a wise man who builds his house upon a rock. He's like, if you listen to him and you actually do them, he's basing wisdom on his own teaching, on doing his teaching. First off, he believes them. What is Jesus' effect on his disciples? Now, does Jesus turn his disciples into rabbis? What does he turn them into? Disciples, which is what? Help us unpack that a little bit. What's a disciple? It's a follower. It's someone who goes on a way. There is a direction of their life. The main term in disciple is to be disciplined. Okay? Now, most people would say that's not really freedom, to be disciplined. But true freedom is found actually in discipline. It's found in doing these things. And I think we see that by the commands that Jesus gives. He's like, do these things. If you love me, basically, I'm going to set you free, and you'll go in this route. His disciples didn't just become, his followers became disciples, but they also, ultimately, they became witnesses. They didn't become necessarily just teachers of new doctrine, teachers of new things. They become witnesses of his grace and his power in the lives. And I would like to look at this text that we looked at last week on what that actually looks like. When we look at Thoughts Around the Blessings, page 145, Ellen White says this. She says, when the doctrine we accept kills sin in the heart, purifies the soul from defilement, bears fruit unto holiness, we may know that it is the truth of God. When benevolence, kindness, the joy of right doing is in our hearts, when we exalt Christ and not self, we may know that our faith is of the right order. Isn't that amazing? We just read this morning in our Sabbath school class that we looked at the demon-possessed man, or the men, depending on which gospel you read. And it says something there. It says he was sitting in his right mind. In other words, what? What was he for the first time in who knows how long?
Free.
He was free. He was free of control of the things that had possessed him, the legion of demons that had possessed him, and taken away his ability to choose. I think Mrs. White, now listen to this very carefully. I want to be careful on this because it can be misinterpreted. Mrs. White claimed to have truth, right? Adventists, we claim to have truth. So say yes, we do. Okay, yeah, okay, good. Okay, we're all in agreement. But by her mentality, who she was as a person, I truly believe she died a student of Jesus Christ and of the Bible. She continued learning. She never said, oh, I've got it all. We've got the ultimate truth. We found it all. We are going to keep going. We're going to keep progressing in this thing because we realize that this book is such a deep book. And how do you actually find out something, fully know something that is infinite in our God? It's impossible. And that's the wonderful thing about it. It keeps on going. It should always be fresh. So, I think sometimes we make a mistake by saying we have the truth, meaning the ultimate truth in everything, and we actually close our ears off sometimes to truth because we think that. We don't actually listen to other people. This is actually stated here. Listen to this quote by Miroslav Volf. This man was he was a captive in Yugoslavia, and he was interrogated and mentally tortured. And he desperately wanted to understand his, not understand, but to forgive his captor and to actually love his captor. Someone that has taken away everything from him. And robbed him not only in that current state, but for his future. He kept robbing him. He said he would have dreams, and this man, Captain G, would keep reappearing in his dreams. But he says this about truth. Sorry, that keeps hitting. He says, if I claim to possess truth, I will be unlikely even to entertain the possibility that others may be right. Or at least partly right, and I wrong, or at least partly wrong. Claims to possess the uncontestable truth aren't always wrong. They're not always wrong. Sometimes we have that. But they're always dangerous. Especially dangerous when a person's claim to possess the truth matters more than the truth itself. Did you hear that? When I think this is the problem that the Pharisees made, the scribes made with Jesus here. They claimed to possess the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, okay? And they were actually closed off to the real truth. Because they claimed to be the possessors of the entirety of truth. Here's where it said, we need to be able to learn how to do something. I think sometimes when we hear something that is opposite of our understanding of something, sometimes we've built a foundation. As we've learned 2 weeks ago, we build our foundation on something other than Jesus and Jesus alone, Jesus Christ. And sometimes when that foundation, we realize that, well, maybe that's not as stable as we thought it was, it can crush our whole house. We need to understand that we need to learn how to pick those blocks out, look at them out here, and realize, is this something that I need to truly, does this bring me closer to Jesus? Does this draw me in this way, this discipleship way towards Jesus or not? And if it is, we put it back in the house, and if it's not, guess what? We need to do away with it. And do away with our pride that maybe we don't have all of the answers. He says this at the end. He says, seekers of truth, on the other hand, will give others the benefit of the doubt. They will inhabit imaginatively the world of the other. And they will endeavor to view events in question with the perspective of others, not just their own. Do you see the difference? He said, we don't have to be claimers of the ultimate truth. Do we have truth? Yes, we said that. Yes, we do. But we don't have to be claimers of ultimate truth. We have to be seekers of ultimate truth. Amen. I truly believe, again, that that's why we started this church. That's why we started this movement in the first place. We broke away from Methodism. We broke away from the other religious sects that were going in a certain direction. We said we need to get back to the Bible. I hope that that's still our heart today. I hope that's still our direction today. And I think it really is. And I think that some of the stories that I've heard coming out of this pandemic, as unfortunate as it has driven us to our knees, and it has driven us to the Word of God to actually see what's reality. what's real, and where is Jesus actually moving in our lives, and to get back to Him, to get back to the truth and get back to ultimate freedom, right? Here on this earth. People may take things away from us, or, there's limited amount of freedom, but we have freedom in Jesus Christ to choose. That is something no one can ever take away from us. It's your story and your choice. And the Word of God that He's put in your heart. There is something said, and I think we need to, or at least I like to live by this thing. When speaking about people that we've learned from and wise people, it says, don't seek to follow the footsteps of the wise. That the term is like, put your foot in their footsteps. But you seek what they sought. I am sold that we need to relearn and re-understand, learn for ourselves really how to read the Bible on a deep level. I'm in several Bible study groups right now that I'm learning how to do that. Like I didn't even know in school. We need to pray for that. And honestly, I want to learn more how to pray. How to have a deeper connection with Jesus. I want that. Do you want that?
Amen.
Church. I think the time for that is right now. Sometimes we jump into action without actually knowing if our Savior is in front of us. But I want to jump into action. Think about this. We read this a couple weeks ago, but when Jesus sends into battle, ahead of all the warriors, who does He send? You guys remember from our Tuesday night reading? Who does He send? He sends the singers ahead of them, and the war is already won before the people even get there. He has a strange way of doing things. And if we're up to following Him, we are going to see miracles happen in the future. Instead of taking matters into our own hands, we have to realize this battle is His. All we have to do, we have to get to know Him and follow Him. That's what we have to do. And it seems cliche, and it seems like we've said this over and over again, but, we're human. And we make mistakes. And we go our own way, and we're prone to wander, and we're prone to do our own thing. And I need that constant reminder that, man, I need to get back to my GPS, as it's called, right? And when we actually believe correctly what the Bible is actually teaching, not just our interpretation, but when we believe correctly, we will see those things happen, not only in our lives, but in our churches and our communities. And it will become the most attractive thing in the entire world. The things of earth, they'll grow strangely dim, and grim. They'll grow awful, right, in the light of His glory and His grace. Because they will see free people actually living. That's what people want. They're starving for that. We just don't know how to get it. Church, that's what we're here for. That's why we're on this planet. That's why we're in this church. Is to lead the way in that with our own lives, with our own church as well. So I would just like to make the offering. Look, we have several Bible studies going, and I've got several more lined up where we're actually going to start groups of how to go through the Bible, and we're not going to jump around. We're actually going to stay in certain texts and just try to understand it on a deeper level. Now, I'm pretty maxed out on my own, but we will start ones in the future of learning how to do this. And I'm learning too, and keep learning how to do it. Anyway, I would just love it if any of you are wanting to be involved with that. Several of you already are with me and with each other. Get into groups, do this thing together, and help each other. That's I guess my plea and my cry for us is that we get back to really reading it and really understanding it for ourselves. Let's have a word of prayer. And just keep in mind, in 2 weeks we will be probably closed, and we'll have at Tiana we're going to have a camping time over there. Lord, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for your truth. Thank you that you want to set us free. You want to do that now and today. And Lord, sometimes that takes time to disassemble things that we believe that aren't true, maybe. Lord, I just pray that if we have made our foundation on any of that, I just pray that you break it down and that you give us a firm foundation on who you really are. Not just who you were, but who you are today in this world, in our lives, and how to react and how to be in a world that it's crazy, Lord. It has gone crazy. Help us to be of a sound mind, in our own right mind and under control, that we can make our own decisions as well, Lord. Thank you so much for this little church. Thank you that you've called us, Lord. Lord, we just ask for your Holy Spirit and ask for a deeper desire for your word, for an understanding of who you are. We love you. Amen.
Amen.